Think you know everything about TV's most famous orange Dodge Charger? From planes scouring the countryside for replacement cars to the General Lee receiving more fan mail than the actual actors, the behind-the-scenes story of this iconic muscle car is filled with bizarre production secrets, shocking destruction, and unexpected controversies that transformed a simple 1969 Charger into television legend. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about the Dukes of Hazzard's 1969 Dodge Charger General Lee. Fact 1. The welded doors were a complete accident. One of the most iconic images from the Dukes of Hazzard is watching Bo and Luke Duke slide through the windows of the General Lee instead of opening the doors like normal people. But this signature move that became synonymous with the show was never actually part of the original plan. The whole thing happened by complete accident during the filming of the very first chase sequence, and what started as a production mishap turned into one of television's most memorable trademarks. During that initial chase scene where Bo and Luke were pursuing their friend Cooter in Sheriff Roscoe's police car, the passenger door handle on the General Lee got damaged when the car sideswiped a row of mailboxes along the road. The impact bent the handle in such a way that the door couldn't be opened from the outside anymore, which created an immediate problem since Tom Wopat, who played Luke Duke, needed to get into the car for the next shot. Rather than stop filming and waste time trying to fix the damaged door or swap out the car entirely, Wopat made a quick decision and simply climbed through the open window to get inside, treating it like it was no big deal. The director watched this spontaneous moment and absolutely loved how cool and effortless it looked on camera, so he immediately told John Schneider, who played Bo Duke, to do the exact same thing for his entrance. That unplanned window entry looked so natural and perfectly captured the rebellious, rule-breaking spirit of the Duke boys that the producers decided to make it a permanent feature of the show. And from that point forward, the General Lee's doors were intentionally welded shut to ensure the actors would always have to climb through the windows for every single episode. Fact 2. Over 300 Chargers were destroyed. The Dukes of Hazzard didn't just use a few stunt cars and rotate them throughout the series like most television shows do. They absolutely demolished an estimated 300 to 325 Dodge Chargers during the show's 7-season run from 1979 to 1985. To put that in perspective, the production crew was destroying more than one General Lee per episode on average, which means every single week of filming required fresh Chargers to be converted into the famous orange race car, only to be wrecked beyond repair. The reason for this massive destruction came down to the nature of the stunts themselves, particularly those signature jumps that the Duke boys performed in nearly every episode where the car would fly through the air over police cars, rivers, gorges, and just about anything else the writers could think of. While these jumps looked incredible on television and became the show's calling card, the reality was that landing a 2-ton muscle car after launching it dozens of feet into the air caused catastrophic damage to the vehicle's frame, suspension, and body structure. Most of the time, a Charger that performed one of these major jumps would have its frame bent so badly that it could never be driven properly again, which meant it had to be immediately retired and replaced with another car. By the time production wrapped up in 1985, only 17 original General Lees managed to survive out of the hundreds that were used, and even those survivors weren't in perfect condition since most of them existed in various states of disrepair with dents, damaged paint, mechanical issues, and other wear and tear from their time on set. Fact 3. Piper Cub aircraft hunted for Chargers. As the Dukes of Hazzard continued destroying Chargers at an alarming rate throughout the early 1980s, Warner Brothers found themselves facing a problem they never anticipated when they started the show, which was that 1969 Dodge Chargers were becoming increasingly difficult to find anywhere in the United States. The production team had already exhausted most of the obvious sources like used car dealerships, salvage yards, and classified ads in newspapers, so they needed to come up with more creative solutions to keep finding the specific model year they needed for the General Lee. This desperation led to one of the strangest decisions in television production history when Warner Brothers decided to hire pilots flying Piper Cub airplanes to conduct aerial searches over entire communities looking for chargers that might be sitting in driveways, backyards, or parking lots. These small, single-engine planes would fly low over residential neighborhoods, shopping centers, and anywhere else people might park their cars, with the pilots specifically scanning for the distinctive body shape of 1968 and 1969 Dodge Chargers from above. Once a pilot spotted a potential candidate, the production crew would track down the owner's address and either knock on their door or leave notes on the car's windshield offering to purchase the vehicle, sometimes offering $500 plus a clean title to convince owners to part with their Chargers. This aircraft-assisted car hunting operation became necessary because the show had created an actual shortage of these vehicles across the country, and the production team was literally competing against the growing popularity of the show itself. Since fans were also trying to buy Chargers to build their own General Lee replicas at the same time the studio needed them for filming. Fact 4. The car got more fan mail than the stars. The General Lee wasn't just a popular vehicle on the Dukes of Hazzard, it became such a beloved character in its own right that it actually received more fan mail than any of the human actors on the show, which is something that had never really happened before in television history. During the peak years of the series, the production office was flooded with approximately 60,000 letters from fans every single month, and when the staff started sorting through all that mail, they discovered that an astounding 35,000 of those letters were specifically addressed to or about the General Lee itself. This means that more than half of all the fan correspondence coming in wasn't for John Schneider, Tom Wopat, Catherine Bach, or any of the other cast members, but rather for the bright orange Dodge Charger that the Duke boys drove around Hazzard County. Fans would write letters asking detailed questions about the car's specifications, like what kind of engine it had or how fast it could go, while others would request photographs of the General Lee that they could hang on their bedroom walls, and some would even send fan mail directly addressed to the car, as if it were a living, breathing character with its own personality. The studio had to assign staff members specifically to handle the overwhelming volume of General Lee correspondence, sorting through requests for autographed pictures of the car, technical information about how the stunts were performed, and even marriage proposals from fans who joked about wanting to marry the famous Charger. This unprecedented level of attention for a vehicle proved that the General Lee had transcended its role as a simple prop and had become the true star of the show in the minds of viewers. Fact 5. Miniature models replaced real cars. By the time the Dukes of Hazzard reached its final seasons in the mid-1980s, the Charger shortage had become so severe that Warner Brothers was forced to resort to a desperate and controversial solution that nobody involved with the show actually wanted to use. The studio hired special effects companies to build and film radio-controlled miniature versions of the General Lee that could be used for the big jump sequences instead of risking real full-sized Chargers, which meant that some of the most dramatic stunts in the later episodes weren't actually performed by stunt drivers in real cars, but were instead shot using small-scale models with remote controls. The decision to use miniatures was purely financial, since the production simply couldn't find enough real Chargers to keep destroying them at the rate the show required, and buying whatever few vehicles they could locate had become prohibitively expensive as the cars grew rarer and more valuable. However, this cost-cutting measure turned out to be wildly unpopular with almost everyone involved in the production, from the actors to the directors to the crew members who felt that the miniature jumps looked noticeably fake and unconvincing on screen compared to the real stunts that had made the show famous. Tom Wopat, who played Luke Duke, was particularly vocal about his disappointment with the miniature cars and openly criticized how unrealistic they appeared in the final footage, arguing that viewers could easily tell the difference between a real Charger flying through the air and a tiny model that didn't have the same weight and physics. Many fans of the show agree that the latter half of Season 6 and most of Season 7 are considered the weakest episodes of the entire series, largely because of these obviously fake-looking miniature jumps that undermine the authenticity that had always been one of the show's greatest strengths. Fact 6. 500 to 1,000 pounds of ballast in the trunk. The spectacular jumps that made the Dukes of Hazzard famous didn't happen naturally with the Dodge Charger's original design, and the production crew had to add between 500 and 1,000 pounds of sandbags, concrete blocks, or other heavy ballast materials into the trunk of every General Lee before it could safely perform those airborne stunts. The reason for all this extra weight came down to basic physics and the fact that the 1969 Dodge Charger was an extremely front-heavy vehicle because of its massive V8 engine sitting at the front of the car, which meant that when the car launched off a ramp without any counterbalance, all that weight in the front would cause the nose to dip downward while the car was in midair. During the early episodes of the show, before the crew figured out this weight distribution problem, several jump attempts ended in disaster when the Chargers would nosedive and land directly on their front bumpers, causing the cars to crumple on impact or even flip end over end in some cases, which was extremely dangerous for the stunt drivers and completely destroyed the vehicles. The production team learned through trial and error that by loading the trunk with hundreds of pounds of heavy materials, they could shift the center of gravity backward and keep the car more level during flight, allowing it to land on all four wheels instead of crashing nose first into the ground. This ballast system became standard procedure for every single jump throughout the rest of the series, and the stunt coordinators would carefully calculate exactly how much weight to add based on the height and distance of each particular jump to ensure the smoothest possible landing while still protecting the driver from excessive impact forces. Fact 7. AMC ambassadors were disguised as General Lees. When the supply of 1969 Dodge Chargers became critically low during the later seasons of the Dukes of Hazzard, the producers came up with an ingenious but slightly deceptive solution by purchasing AMC ambassadors and transforming them into fake General Lees that could fool audiences who were watching at home on their television screens. The AMC Ambassador was a completely different car made by American Motors Corporation, but it had a somewhat similar body shape and size that the production team thought they could work with if they were clever about how they filmed it. The crew would paint these ambassadors in the signature bright orange color, add the number 01 to the doors, slap a Confederate flag on the roof, and install the distinctive push bar on the front to make them look as close to the real General Lee as possible from certain angles. The real trick came down to using careful camera work and smart editing techniques to hide the differences between the Ambassador and the actual Charger, which meant the directors would shoot these substitute cars from distances where viewers couldn't see the details clearly, use quick cuts that didn't linger on the vehicle too long, or film them during action sequences where everything was moving so fast that nobody would have time to notice the slightly different grille shape or body lines. Remarkably, this substitution worked well enough that many viewers watching the show during its original broadcast never realized they were sometimes looking at a completely different make and model of car pretending to be the General Lee. And it was only years later, when fans started analyzing episodes more carefully, that people discovered the production had been sneaking these AMC imposters into various scenes throughout the series. Fact 8. A Pontiac Firebird almost got the role. The General Lee could have looked completely different, and television history might have been changed forever if series creator Guy Waldron had gotten his way during the early planning stages of the Dukes of Hazzard, because his original vision for the Duke boys' car was actually a Pontiac Firebird instead of the Dodge Charger that eventually became iconic. Waldron was drawn to the Firebird because it was a sleek and powerful muscle car that he felt would look great on camera and fit the rebellious spirit of the show. But he wisely decided to defer to the expertise of someone who knew much more about the practical realities of performing dangerous automotive stunts on a weekly basis. That expert was Al Wyatt Sr., the show's stunt coordinator who had years of experience working with high-speed car chases and jumps in Hollywood productions, and when Waldron asked him which vehicle would be best suited for the intense physical demands of the show, Wyatt immediately recommended the 1969 Dodge Charger. The reason Wyatt felt so confident about choosing the Charger came from his previous work on the 1974 action film called Dirty Mary Crazy Larry, where he had coordinated all the stunt driving using 3 different Dodge Chargers throughout that production, and had become intimately familiar with exactly what those cars could handle in terms of punishment and performance. Wyatt knew from first-hand experience that the Charger had the right combination of durability, power, and handling characteristics to survive the kind of abuse that the Dukes of Hazzard would require on a regular basis, and his recommendation proved to be absolutely correct since the car became just as much of a star as any of the human actors on the show. Fact 9. Real accidents were edited into episodes. Not everything that went wrong during the filming of the Dukes of Hazzard was a disaster that needed to be covered up or edited out, and in at least one memorable instance, an actual unplanned accident became part of the final episode that viewers watched at home on television. During the production of one particular episode, one of the actors was driving the General Lee for a scene when they genuinely lost control of the vehicle in a way that wasn't part of the script or intended to happen, and the car ended up crashing in a manner that could have been dangerous, but fortunately didn't result in any serious injuries. The lucky part of this unfortunate situation was that the camera crew happened to be rolling and filming at the exact moment when the accident occurred, which meant they captured the entire unscripted crash on film from start to finish with all the authentic chaos and unpredictability that comes with a real loss of control. Rather than treating this footage as a blooper or production mishap that should be thrown away and never spoken of again, the directors and editors saw an opportunity to use the genuine accident to their advantage by incorporating it directly into the storyline of that episode. The creative team went back and adjusted the script so that the crash made sense within the context of the plot, essentially writing the real-world mistake into the fictional narrative, as if it had always been meant to happen that way all along. This decision not only saved the production time and money by avoiding the need to reshoot an expensive stunt sequence, but it also gave audiences an incredibly authentic and visceral crash scene that had real stakes and real consequences because it actually happened to a real person driving a real car. Fact 10. The record-breaking opening credits. Jump destroyed the car. The most famous jump in the entire history of the Dukes of Hazzard is the spectacular stunt that appeared in the opening credits of every single episode, where the General Lee launches off a dirt ramp and soars majestically through the air over a police car. And what most viewers never realized while watching this iconic moment week after week was that the Charger used to film that incredible jump was completely destroyed the instant it hit the ground. The jump itself was absolutely massive by any measure, covering a distance of 82 feet horizontally while reaching a peak height of 16 feet in the air, which set records for television stunts at the time and became one of the most memorable images associated with the show. When the car finally came back down to Earth after its brief flight, the impact from landing was so violent and severe that the vehicle's frame was bent beyond any possibility of repair, the suspension was completely destroyed, and the entire structure of the car was compromised to the point where it could never be driven again. Despite the fact that this particular Charger only performed one single jump before being permanently retired to the scrapyard, it ended up becoming the most seen General Lee of them all because the production team used that same piece of archive footage in the opening credits for every episode throughout the show's entire 7-season run. This means that while hundreds of other Chargers were destroyed doing various stunts throughout the series, this one specific car that died during the opening credits jump technically appeared in more episodes than any other General Lee ever used in the production, making it the only vehicle that fans saw in literally every show. Fact 11. None had the legendary Hemi engine. One of the biggest misconceptions about the General Lee is that it was powered by the legendary 426 Hemi engine that made the 1969 Dodge Charger famous as one of the most powerful muscle cars ever built, but the reality is that not a single General Lee used during the entire television series actually had that iconic engine under the hood. The Hemi was considered the ultimate performance engine of its era and came with a massive price tag to match its reputation, which meant that finding enough Hemi-powered Chargers to destroy on a weekly basis would have been financially impossible for the production budget, not to mention the fact that Hemi Chargers were already rare and valuable even back in the late 1970s when the show began filming. Instead, the production team used whatever engines happened to be in the Chargers they could find, which meant that different General Lees had different power plants, including 318 cubic inch engines, 383 cubic inch engines, and 440 cubic inch engines, depending on what was available at the time. The close-up cars that were used for filming dialogue scenes and weren't subjected to major stunts typically had 383 engines, while the special purpose-built ski car that drove on two wheels was equipped with a lighter 318 engine, and the stunt drivers actually preferred the 440 cubic inch engines for the bigger jumps because they provided more power and better performance. It wasn't until the 2005 movie adaptation of the Dukes of Hazzard that audiences finally saw a General Lee with the authentic 426 Hemi engine that fans had always imagined the original television car must have had all along. Fact 12. The orange paint was whatever they had. The bright orange color of the General Lee is one of its most recognizable features, and fans often refer to it as Hemi Orange, as if every car was painted with exactly the same shade throughout the entire series. But the truth is that the production never used a consistent or standardized paint color, and instead just applied whatever orange paint happened to be available at the time they were building each car. This casual approach to one of the most defining visual characteristics of the General Lee meant that different cars ended up being noticeably different shades of orange depending on which batch of paint the crew had on hand during that particular season or episode. The early General Lees that were built in Georgia during the first season were hand-painted by crew members using whatever they could find, with some cars getting painted with 1975 Corvette Flame Red, which had an orangish tint to it, while others received the authentic Chrysler EV2 paint code that was officially called Hemi Orange and had been used on actual Dodge vehicles. Later in the production, when they moved filming to California and started building cars more systematically, there were still inconsistencies because different paint suppliers would have slightly different formulations even when they were supposedly mixing the same color. If you go back and watch episodes from different seasons with a careful eye, you can actually see these variations in the shade of orange from scene to scene and episode to episode, with some General Lees appearing more reddish while others look more yellow or bright, depending on what paint was used. This lack of standardization would probably drive modern television producers crazy, since maintaining visual consistency is considered so important today. But back in the early 1980s, nobody seemed particularly concerned about whether every car was exactly the same shade. Fact 13. Brothers charged $3,000 per destroyed car. Two brothers named Andre and Renaud Veluzat became the primary builders of General Lees during seasons 2 through 4 of the Dukes of Hazzard, and they managed to turn the show's constant destruction of cars into an extremely lucrative business arrangement that made them quite a bit of money over those years. The Veluzat brothers set up a unique payment structure with Warner Brothers, where they would charge the studio $250 per week to rent each General Lee they built, which provided a steady income stream for cars that stayed in rotation, but the real money came from a separate fee. They charged every single time one of their cars was completely destroyed during filming. Whenever a General Lee built by the Veluzats was totaled beyond repair in a jumper crash, Warner Brothers had to pay them an additional $2,000 to $3,000 on top of the rental fees they'd already been paying for that vehicle, which meant the brothers were essentially getting paid twice for the same car. This arrangement turned out to be remarkably profitable for Andre and Renaud, since the Dukes of Hazzard was destroying cars at such a high rate throughout those middle seasons, and they ended up accumulating substantial paychecks that they put to good use in a way that had nothing to do with cars or television production. The Veluzat brothers took the money they earned from building and destroying General Lees and invested it into restoring Melody Ranch, a massive 110-acre estate in Placerita Canyon near Newhall, California, that had been purchased by the famous cowboy star Gene Autry back in 1953 and had fallen into disrepair over the decades, giving the historic property a new lease on life thanks to the success of the General Lee. Fact 14. The stunt created a real Charger shortage. The Dukes of Hazzard didn't just use up a lot of cars for entertainment purposes. It actually created a genuine nationwide shortage of 1969 Dodge Chargers that had measurable effects on the collector car market and availability of these vehicles across the entire United States. When Dodge manufactured the 1969 Charger model, they produced approximately 89,199 total units, which sounds like a large number, until you consider that the Dukes of Hazzard managed to consume and destroy over 300 of them during just 7 years of production from 1979 to 1985. To put that in perspective, the show single-handedly eliminated roughly 1/3 of 1% of all 1969 Chargers that were ever built, and when you factor in all the other Chargers that had already been wrecked in accidents, scrapped due to age, rusted away in junkyards, or otherwise removed from circulation during the decade between when they were manufactured and when the show started filming, the impact becomes even more significant. The production's insatiable appetite for these specific cars meant that by the mid-1980s, finding a 1969 Charger in decent condition anywhere in America had become genuinely difficult, and the few examples that were still around suddenly became much more valuable as collectors realized these vehicles were disappearing faster than anyone had anticipated. The irony of the situation was that the show's popularity actually made things worse because fans who wanted to build their own General Lee replicas were also competing to buy the same cars that the production needed, creating a feedback loop where the show's success directly contributed to making its own source material increasingly rare and expensive. Fact 15. Bubba Watson bought Lee No. 1 for $110,000. Professional golfer Bubba Watson became the owner of one of the most historically significant General Lees in existence when he purchased the very first General Lee ever built, known as Lee No. 1, at an auction in 2012 for the impressive sum of $110,000. This particular car had an incredible backstory because it was actually discovered sitting in a Georgia junkyard back in 2001, where collectors found it in rough condition and recognized it as the original car from the show's very first episode, which made it an extremely valuable piece of television history worth restoring to its former glory. Watson owned the car for several years and displayed it proudly as part of his collection, but the vehicle became the center of controversy in 2015 following the tragic shooting at a church in Charleston, South Carolina that killed several black churchgoers and sparked a nationwide conversation about Confederate symbols and their meaning in modern America. In response to the growing backlash against the Confederate flag that was painted on the roof of the General Lee, Watson announced on social media that he planned to paint over the controversial symbol and replace it with an American flag instead, stating his belief that all men are created equal and wanting to make a statement about his values. This decision to modify such a famous and historically significant piece of pop culture memorabilia sparked absolutely massive backlash from Dukes of Hazzard fans who were outraged at the idea of altering the original General Lee and accused Watson of destroying an important artifact from television history, with many people flooding his social media accounts with negative comments and criticism about his plans to change the iconic car that so many people remembered from their childhoods.